Hello, and welcome to this episode of Be the Wolf. Now, if you feel like your life is okay, or maybe worse than okay, but you know that it's not everything it should be, maybe you find yourself having these questions like, is this all there is? There has to be more than this. And you've worked your ass off and you've done all the things to have the good life, but it's still not measuring up to what you feel in your heart you're meant for. You're going to want to listen to this episode. Now, another reason you might want to listen to this episode is, have you ever found yourself in a situation where maybe there's really big, boisterous people and lots of people that seem to be taking up all the attention, and you find yourself shrinking back? It's like you can't rise up to meet them in their big, boisterous energy, but you shrink back instead. If you found yourself doing that, you're going to want to listen to this episode. Today, I'm going to talk about shrinking in the face of dot, in the face of big, boisterous energy, in the face of somebody feeling like shit, shrinking in the face of somebody being angry and mad. And like I said before, if you're not living the life that you feel that you were meant for, this is a very important thing. Now, for me, my life, I spent most of my life disappearing myself, most of my life hiding, most of my life shrinking. And I did this because my history had told me that it was not safe to take up space. It was not safe to be all of who I am. The part of me that wanted to achieve, don't do that. Even if you do achieve, it'll get taken away from you. That was my experience. We could start with, there's so many different instances, but one of the most profound ones for me was when every year at Halloween, I would get as much candy as I possibly could. And then I would get to eat candy that night. And then the next day, at my lunch, there were 2 pieces of candy. And the next day, at my lunch, there were 2 pieces of candy. And then after that, there was no more candy. And I would think to myself all of the time, I worked so hard and I got all of this candy. Where has it gone? And so later, I decided, you know what? I am going to really go for it. Really go for it. So I got a king size pillowcase and I went out right after school. In fact, some of the houses I knocked on, the doors, they didn't even have candy yet. So they gave me money or an apple or something. But I just went all over the neighborhood, all over the town, and I got as much candy as I could. And I filled up that pillowcase 3/4 full. And if you've ever seen a king size pillowcase, you know that is a shit ton of candy. I got to eat as much candy as I wanted that night. And then the next day, I had 2 pieces of candy in my lunch. And then the next day, I had 2 pieces of candy in my lunch. And I thought, I'm going to have 2 pieces of candy in my lunch for years with all the candy that I got. I was very excited. But on that third day, no candy. So I learned that no matter how hard I work, I don't get very much. And so that became a belief system that I ran by. When they wanted me to skip a grade, I was so excited because it meant that I was smart, and there's something in me that really liked to achieve and really liked to accomplish and get farther than other people and really push those limits, because that's one of my core values that was ingrained in me, in my soul. I came into this life wanting to push those edges. I used to jump off the second floor of our roof of our house. I used to do backflips out of swings. I used to do really push those edges, push those limits. And that meant when for me, it was important. For me, I did it everywhere. So I was always doing the best that I could in school. And I didn't get accolades from my mom for doing well in school. I got shit on if I did poorly, but I didn't get any good jobs or anything like that. So I was doing this for me because I really enjoyed it. And when they wanted to skip me a grade, I was excited. I wanted to that achievement, that pushing that edges, that going farther than and beyond where other people typically go was lit up inside me. But my mom said no. She said it would stunt my social growth. And when they wanted to put me in the gifted program, again, my mom said no. So I just kept learning eventually to shrink the smart part of me, to shrink the achieving part of me, to shrink the parts of me that want to push those limits. So I got smaller and smaller. So I was taking up less and less space. And when you are pushing the edges and when you are achieving and when you are going beyond where most people have gone before, you are taking up a shit ton of space. At least I was. And maybe not everybody likes it. For me in my life, I got things taken away from me. And I don't know about you, but maybe you got in trouble. Maybe when you were taking up a lot of space, being joyful and boisterous, maybe you got yelled at, told to be quiet, told you're being too much. So you learned to shrink. Maybe you got in trouble. For me, when I was taking up too much space, we were at the Hot Cake House, is the place my mom and her friends used to always go, and they would sit for hours and smoke cigarettes and drink coffee and talk shit. And of course, as a small child, I would be bored and frustrated, and I would want to take up space. And I would be sent to the car to sit in the car, 6 years old, sitting alone in the car in the parking lot of the Hot Cake House. So I learned to shrink. I didn't want to get sent to the car, so I would shrink. And there are these patterns that happen throughout my life and maybe throughout your life where you learned that the more space you took up, the worse it was for you. So I just shared some things, but then we can even throw on the fact that if I took up too much space, if I needed too much, if I wanted too much, not only would I get yelled at, not only would I get sent to the car, but I also used to get hit. And so I learned to shrink some more, to shrink some more. And I learned that if I have an opinion, I need to keep it to myself. I learned it when I was 7 years old and I went off on my mom's boyfriend for getting wasted while he was babysitting me. And later he sexually assaulted me. And my mind equated the two. Oh, if I speak my opinion, something bad will happen. So I will shrink. And later in the 7th grade, I was telling a speech and I was saying all the things that I hadn't gotten in trouble for, all the things that my mom said. It was a speech about would you rather be a boy or a girl? And I said all these really crappy things about being a girl because I would have rather have been a boy because the truth was I just really didn't want to be me anymore. But then I said the truth about why I didn't want to be a girl. I said I didn't want to have my period because the year before I had gotten my period in school and everybody knew. And my mom sent me back to school after I went home to change my clothes. So it was very mortifying. I wanted to shrink. But I said the thing that I really wanted, that I really meant, the truth. And I was so terrified to do it. It was like the clock was ticking. I had to fill up the time. It's what do I say? What do I say? What do I say? And then finally, the truth, my true opinion came out. And later, I went to meet up with my friends at lunch and they said, we don't want to be friends with you. And see, I thought it was because of that truth bomb, my honest opinion. And so I learned more that there are consequences to speaking your truth, speaking your honest opinion. No, just say what other people say. Because then at least if they don't like it, it's not about you or about me. And in fact, as I later was a bartender and I would have these ideas and these thoughts, and I would sometimes test them out. In fact, I even said one of the things I loved about bartending was I would test out my theories and test out my thoughts. And if I had a thought and if I felt really comfortable and really safe around somebody, I would say my opinion just a little bit. And if they seemed to be receptive, I would say it just a little bit more. And if they seemed to be receptive, then I would say it full on out. And if they seemed to be receptive, I would feel safe enough to say it to somebody else. So I would test these opinions because the truth was, I didn't feel like I could take up space and have my own opinions. And so I would test them out on my customers, these opinions. And if quite a few people seemed to like them or be okay with them, then I knew, okay, that was safe. I could take up space with that opinion, but nothing else unless it had been tested. And so I spent my life trying really hard to make things happen in my life, but they were bound by this rule that I couldn't take up space. The real me, the truth of me couldn't take up space. My photography career, my art career couldn't take up space to my bartending career because my bartending career was safe. I didn't have to show my heart in my bartending career. I would step behind that bar, I would put on the face, I would make everybody happy, but don't dare show any part of me that's not acceptable. Don't let them see that you're in a foul mood. Don't let them see or hear an opinion that has not been tested. Follow the rules, keep everybody in line, break up fights. I could be big and take up space to break up a fight, but that was the requirement of my job. I was there to keep everybody else safe. But my heart, my passion, the business that I really wanted to make grow required me to take up space. It required me to show you who I was. In fact, my very first art show, I was terrified. I remember standing in that room. It was an art show in a bar, a group show, one night only. And felt like I was just pacing. And everything inside me felt like it was like fire ants crawling through my body. So it was deeper than anxiety. It was like anxiety on fire. And I just sat back and I watched people look at my art, and I was too scared to say anything to anybody. Some people came up to me and they said, "Oh, I really like your pieces." And I'm like internally freaking out. Are they telling me the truth? Are they not? But I shrank back in the corner. And in fact, that's what I did at every art show that I had. I talked to the people that I knew that I felt safe enough to take up space with. But everybody else, I hadn't tested the waters. I hadn't proven if it was safe to be me or take up space around them. So I shrank in the corners and I watched people look at my art and I freaked out. And one of the things that you need to do to really make it in the art world is to take up some space. You need to network. You need to talk to people. You need to show who you are. And you can put on a front like I did bartending a lot of the times, put on that face and charm people and do all of that. But still, you have to show your art, and you eventually have to talk about your art. And if you're making art from your heart and from your soul, and most artists do, whether they want to or not, they're putting their subconscious into a visual representation. So they're showing the deepest parts of themselves typically without even knowing it. And so talking about it and putting it out there and letting it be seen and letting it take up space is difficult. There's that stereotype of the starving artist. This is why. Because you can make the art, but then to actually put it out in the world and have other people buy it, you have to take up space. And a lot of artists create their art from their pain, and nobody really wants anybody to see their pain. Nobody really, very few people want you to see all of who you are. This is what being the wolf is all about, is being all of who you are, being the part of you that is okay taking up space. And I'm not talking about the way a narcissist would take up space. Oh, hey, look at me. I'm so great. I'm the greatest. Not that grandiose taking up space. I am talking about the truth of who you are, taking up space and walking into the room, letting all the masks drop, letting people see who you are, because who you are is brilliant. Who you are is amazing and magnificent. And who you are is what is so needed in this world. But yet we bend and we contort ourselves into what we think is acceptable, what we think we should be, instead of taking up space as we are. We stuff down who we are so that nobody sees, so that we can't get hurt again. Because we learned somewhere along the way that it was not safe to take up space, or at least I did. And I know a lot of my clients have. And I would bet there's a lot of you who also learned that it's not safe and it's not okay to take up space. If you look at the generations past, children should be seen and not heard. Don't let your voice take up space. Be quiet. Have everything put together. Don't let anybody see your mess or your mistakes. And here's the fucking thing about mistakes. So many people, I know I was, so many people are trying so hard to do it right, not make mistakes. They are sitting behind the computer, perfecting everything, making sure nothing can go wrong, and thinking about every possible thing that might go wrong and trying to counteract for that before they ever put it in the world. And what happens is they never end up putting it in the world. The part of you that's maybe not so good at the details or scheduling. So you're thinking to yourself, in my business, I need to get somebody to take care of that stuff instead of trying to do it yourself. And I'm not saying that you need to do it all yourself. What I am saying is you need to be willing to make the fucking mistakes, because the part of you that's unwilling to do the things that you're not great at is because you have learned somewhere along the way that making mistakes or not doing it the way somebody else wants it done is not okay, and it's not safe, and it comes with consequences. So you disappear that part of yourself that does that. And then in your business, you can't do it, or you do it really poorly. And then you're like, oh, I need to delegate it, right? And all the business gurus tell you to delegate. And delegating is great. But when you are delegating because you don't want to do something, ironically, the people you hire to do that thing are going to also have that same frequency. So they're going to either also not be great at doing it, and they will have just talked a good game because they wanted the job, or they will be so over the top with it that they will be a total control freak. Because you attract what you are. If you're okay with making mistakes, if you're comfortable with making mistakes, this is not your strength, and you're hiring out at that point, you're going to also hire out somebody who feels comfortable and is good at that job. Whereas before, you're going to hire somebody who also is afraid of fucking making mistakes. And so they're going to be over the top controlling and over the top meticulous, to the point where there's no breath and no room for flow. they're going to stifle it, or they're going to be also bad at doing those logistical things because they're so afraid of making mistakes. So then they will fall and drop the ball at those things. Now, if you've ever hired somebody who didn't work out and you hired somebody to do the things that you were not good at, you may have been hiring from that place of being afraid to make mistakes. One of my mentors says you need to learn to love the things that you don't love in your business. And I don't know that you need to learn to love them, but you need to just be perfectly content doing them. And at that point, when you can do them, even if it's not perfect, you will have known that you have been reclaiming and undisappearing that part of you that makes mistakes. And so you have more freedom, and the people you hire from that place will be better, and they will do better work for you, and they will work better with you. But if you're freaking out about mistakes, then if you have an employee that makes a mistake, you're going to freak out because you think it's a reflection of you, because you've been trying to hide the part of you that's not perfect at a particular thing. You've disappeared that yourself. And so you're using other people, not consciously, but subconsciously, to fill up the parts of yourself you have disappeared. I'm going to hire this person to take care of the things that I will refuse to do. I am going to get in a relationship. And how you always have people say, oh, they complete me. I am the yin to their yang, that I'm the boisterous one and they're the reserved and realistic, quiet one. What you're doing is you're getting in relationship with the parts of yourself you have disappeared, because those parts of you are afraid to take up space. And if they're afraid to take up space, it's still a thing that you need in your life. So you're attracted to and you want that from somebody or something. So in order to feel whole, you get into a relationship with somebody who embodies those parts of you. And you hopefully, if you do that, hopefully you learn to love those parts of you and welcome those parts of yourself back. This is why relationship is often such big personal growth. But then what often ends up happening instead is that you learn to dislike those things even more. And God forbid, if you see some of the parts of them that they've disappeared, that you've also disappeared, and then you have to look at it and you don't want to see it. And then you end up not liking that person anymore. The more you feel safe to take up space with all of who you are, with every aspect of who you are, especially the parts of you that you have disowned, that you thought were forbidden, that you forgot about, that were too wild, too much, too wrong, the more you can take up space with those parts and accept them and love them and allow them to be a part of you, be within you, and express them, the more you will get the life that you want. And when I say express them, I don't mean, oh, I'm afraid to speak up for myself, so when I do, I'm fucking overbearing and squash other people. That means you have not accepted. It means that you have squashed yourself so long and pushed that part of you down so much. You have stuffed it in a closet, buried it in a cage. And then eventually, when you desperately need it, that part will come out, but it's going to come out like a wild animal that's been caged because it hasn't had the opportunity to express it in a natural way. It's been stuffed and stuffed and stuffed and repressed. And so when it finally gets the opportunity to take up space, it swings the pendulum so far that it takes up too much space in a way that squashes other people. When they reintroduced the wolves into Yellowstone National Park, they didn't run out and kill all of the elk. They didn't run out and overdo anything based on the past because the wolf is coming into that park as their whole self. But when they had taken the wolves out of Yellowstone National Park, what ended up happening, the elk overpopulated, right? So there's too much of that aspect of the park. And then they overate the vegetation by the rivers. And now there's not enough vegetation by the rivers. So that has been disappeared. And because of that, the rivers spread out and also disappeared. And then the beavers didn't really have a home to work with the river spread out. So they also disappeared. And this is what happens when you disappear a part of yourself. Some things get over exaggerated, like the elk, and other things disappear until more and more of you disappears. And just like Yellowstone National Park, the more time goes on and the more we bend and shove down different aspects of ourselves, the more we disappear, the more our life becomes a shell of what it's meant to be. So when they introduced the wolves back into Yellowstone National Park, it didn't happen overnight. And the park hadn't become a shell of what it could be overnight either. These things happen gradually. But little by little, just by bringing back the wolf, things started to shift. The elk overpopulation balanced out, right? So if I can bring back the part of me that expresses, eventually the part of me that stayed so quiet will come back into alignment. And it won't be over exaggerated when everything is so dire and so not safe that the only thing that I can do to stay safe is to speak up. But it'll come out balanced once you have welcomed that part back. This is a lot. Taking up space is what's necessary, but taking up space as who you truly are in harmony with yourself is what's important. And when you do that, you end up with the life that you were made for. Otherwise, it's out of balance. Maybe you made a lot of money, but you don't have the love. Maybe you have the love, but your business is falling. And in order to bring it all back into harmony, you've got to welcome you back into you and let you, the true you, start to take up space. All of the aspects of you need to be able to take up space in a way where they haven't been repressed, in a way where they haven't been over exaggerated, right? I know that for me, because I was so scared to take up space, I over exaggerated the part of me that would take care of everybody else because I thought if everybody else felt safe and calm, then maybe I could exist just a little bit. Just a little bit. I spent most of my life not even knowing that I didn't feel like I existed. And it's funny, I talked about how artists show who they really are at the deepest subconscious level through their art, subconsciously usually. And my art showed that. My last big art projects that I did were traveling the country photographing ghost bikes. And ghost bikes are a memorial that's left where a bicyclist was killed. It is the most egregious thing that can happen when somebody doesn't see the other person. And for me, when I did that, I thought it was about spatial awareness, but really it was about taking up space. I always said when you ride a bicycle, you have to ride like you're invisible. You have to take up space in order to stay safe, which the irony was that I was so afraid of taking up space And so, yes, the ghost spikes meant something to me because it was what happened when somebody was taking up space and the other person didn't see it and squashed them. I also photographed roadkill, right? The remnants of what was left, because I had disappeared so much of myself. The truth was that I felt invisible and I felt like there was nothing left. Like I was just a body, a walking hologram of who I was meant to be. Dilapidated buildings, abandoned buildings, same thing. I went through a period where I was burning discarded Christmas trees because I didn't want to see all of the aspects of myself that I had disappeared, that I had discarded. All of this stuff shows up in your behavior, what you say, what you do, how you run your business, how you operate in your relationships. In my relationships, I would shrink until I couldn't take it anymore. And then when it got to the point where I felt like it was my life or theirs, then I would come up and take up space and I would leave. But I couldn't figure out back in those days how to take up space in the relationship. So I would end up with these people who were doing the opposite. They were taking up that over amount of space. And I would just keep shrinking and they would get bigger and bigger, but not with the truth of who they were, because we attract what we are. Two people who are afraid of taking up space as the real self. And so my real self would shrink and shrink, and their real self would hide behind this hologram, bigger version of them that wasn't even them. So their real self is shrinking as they're getting bigger with their hologram self. And I am shrinking as I'm getting bigger with my hologram self, which is to acquiesce and to hold back and to do everything I could to make them happy, where theirs was like making everything not right, making everything bad about me. And I would just take it because my perception is there was something wrong with me. That was the way that I hologrammed and showed up. The real me knew there was nothing wrong with me. And it took to the point of where it felt like my life or theirs before the real me would say, fuck, there is nothing wrong with me. And me as me is going to take up some goddamn space. And then I left because I didn't yet know how to take up space in relationship. I didn't yet know how to take up space anywhere. As you move through your life, this is the thing. If your life isn't feeling the way that you want it to, your relationships are not feeling the way that you want them to, your business, maybe it's making money, but it doesn't feel good to run it. Or maybe it feels okay to run it, but you can't scale it and make it bigger and make it grow. Your life is going to match how much of yourself you're willing to be, how much of yourself you're willing to let take up space, not the part of you that you think is acceptable, but the whole you, the good, the bad, the ugly, because the truth is there is no good or bad. Content dependent. Sometimes you'll need to be tough and big and strong, and sometimes you'll need to be a little softer and more gentle. But when you don't have access to all of those because you've shoved them down and disappeared some of those pieces of you, the other part is exaggerated, and that's not you either. You are a being that can operate in harmony, just like when the wolves came back and everything began to harmonize and the park began to become again what it was meant to be. Vegetation came back, the beavers came back, the birds came back, the elk population balanced, the wolf population grew, but stayed within a balanced thing. There was this harmony that happened. And when you're in harmony, things feel good. And that is what will help you to create the life that you're truly made for, the life that actually feels good to you, feels fulfilling, feels rich, feels abundant, feels joyful, peaceful, full of freedom. If you want more of that in your life, if you want to feel safe taking up space, come to my weekly Be the Wolf calls every Wednesday, 7 a.m. Pacific. Come to my live events. I've got live events pretty much monthly in the LA area. And we go deep in transforming and access and taking up space and learning how to do it exponentially and experientially. We can talk about it all day long, but in the end, it's what you do with it and the experience of it that helps you actually learn it. There's a thing called muscle memory. And the reason it's called muscle memory is because when it gets into your body, just knows how to do it and does it automatically. So learning how to take up space automatically, moving through and clearing those fears and those old things that are keeping you in the story that it's not safe to take up space. It is. In fact, it's safer to take up space as the real you by the time you get to be an adult. And I know sometimes as a child, we had to shrink because we weren't in control of our lives in order to stay safe. But most of us are running that same programming as an adult. And I promise you, when you get over the hump of training your nervous system, training your body that it is safe to take up space, it will be safe to take up space. So come to a Be the Wolf call. Come to a live event. Also, fire walks. Fire walks are about to meet the fire. You have to take up space. It is an experiential thing that allows your nervous system to learn that it is safe to be all of who you are, to be the wolf. Check the links for those events and the Be the Wolf call. And thanks for listening, you all. I invite you to step into more of you. I invite you to take up more space. I invite you to be the wolf, because when you be the wolf, humanity evolves. We'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.